and saying, I am not going to do what the simulation seems to want me to do, is the first step towards becoming self-aware. That's kind of what we're talking about, that if we are characters, let's say we are the Sims, or maybe we can even think about it, looking down at the Sims, how can those Sims become aware? Those Sims have to become aware of us.
Right.
They have to start resisting.
I don't think they can.
Creepy as hell.
I don't think they could. But I could give you an example of what I think would be something that would be not a glitch in the system, but what we could test for, and what we are testing for, and that's the granularity of the universe. That'd be like equivalent to the resolution, right? So if you're looking at the coarser-fine grain of the universe, that can kind of tell us if we're in a simulation to some degree. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, they're using lasers and quantum mechanics and a bunch of other really cool stuff to actually to test this hypothesis. Are they not?
Yeah, that's right. That's trying to test. I would need to go sit down and reread the research, but there's it's generally accepted there's probably something called a Planck length, which is a minimum size in our universe. And at least in principle, that should be something we should be able to test. Yeah. Now, would that persuade you, right? So,
right.
If you found that
this is a...
Sorry, we got Phil's about a second behind everybody else for some reason. He's got time dilation going on. Yeah, just you. I don't know why. We're on the same page, but just on your end.
Can I disconnect and reconnect?
It might work.
If I disconnect, will I reconnect and pop right back in?
We'll let you back in.
Let me try it.
Yes, you come back into existence. Sure. Pop out of reality.
Well, I was going to say. Exactly. I've got to go, put a little more juice in the batteries for you, so that you guys can continue to exist. Fire up the hamsters. Exactly.
Oh, excellent.
I was just going to say that this is the cool thing about what the if is that we get to a point where we need to learn real science by starting with this crazy idea. And so this notion of the resolution of the universe is very, very interesting. So, Matt, you can
absolutely.
All right.
Continue with
that.
Right,
so
right
while we wait for him to come back in, Matt, will you kind of explain or a little bit more what you mean by that that small unit of measurement and how that would go into disproving that we were in a simulation, or might?
Yeah, I can try. It's tricky. So let's see here. One of the things that happens in quantum physics is that energy comes in chunks. That is. If you think about energy as being like water you're pouring into a glass, we're used to thinking about you could pour as much or as little water into a glass as you want. So same with energy, right? I can make the ball go fast, I can make it go medium, I can make it go slow. But on the atomic level, quantum physics takes over, and you can't pour the water. The water comes as ice cubes, so you get these chunks of energy. Right? And that's kind of the basic thing that makes all of the quantum weirdness start. So it turns out that if you have chunks of energy, you also have chunks of space and time, at least hypothetically. Right? So there's a smallest unit of time out there, and a smallest unit of length as well. And this is this is the scales of the universe where our understanding is not very good. So it's definitely in the realm of hypothesis. But let's say that we confirmed it tomorrow in some experimental way, that there was a minimum size to the universe. What would you feel that says about the simulation question?
I don't know.
Who are you asking?
Anybody.
I mean, are you asking? The Planck length, like you said, is a very short distance, and it's smaller than the atomic size of a proton. I think we had somebody in the
way smaller.
Chat actually give it. It's about 10 to the negative 35 meters, so it's really small. Planck time is 10 to the negative 43 seconds, so that's actually a very small period of time. And there's a lot of quantum indeterminacy that things break down at that level, basically, right? So if we're going to say that anything that's less than a Planck time is nonsensical to even talk about, because there's no indivisible way of even dividing a Planck length or Planck time. But there seems to be some correlation here, and I don't want to go too deep in a tangent, but maybe you guys can suss this out. But I know simulation theory and holographic theory are kind of completely different, but I do see a slight overlap, because in holographic principle, you're dealing with information in qubits, in a Planck by Planck square, right? Which would be the smallest area that you can have to store one qubit, which is very similar to what you would have in simulation theory of what would be the smallest resolution to hold information. And in this case, it would have to be something along the lines of a qubit, would it not? So
that's right.
What if that be the case?
If you're willing to invoke quantum computing, then the simulations can get much more complicated than they had been previously.
And would it not require quantum computing? I mean, if it's so complicated, would it require that?
Exactly right. That would certainly be a better solution than the alternative. But the idea that the Planck length is by finding the Planck length, we've found the pixel. And the pixel shows us that we're being procedurally generated, I think is sort of the implication. And I don't know if that's a sound conclusion to make, because it might be that we just happen to live in a granular universe. Right? It's not clear to me that granularity is necessarily more likely to be simulated than not.
Okay, well, let me ask you this then. And I'm probably getting too deep for most people, but this is what the if, right? So that's what you do, right? So, all right, let's go a little bit deeper. I'm not sure that I agree that there would be a correlation between the Planck length and the pixel, because a pixel actually stores information. A pixel can store something on a bit of information, right? So if it's a yellow, green, whatever, it has something in that pixel, right? Because it requires certain information to describe that pixel. But information in the universe has to be in a Planck square kind of thing, right? Planck by Planck that holds one qubit. But would you in a program you have discontinuities, right? It's not a contiguous flow of time, right? It's based upon your clock cycles. So
right, yeah.
In the real world, do you think there's discontinuities, or do you think it's contiguous?
Yeah, I mean, there should be if we're thinking about things like space-time correctly, then yeah, the Planck time suggests there should be these short discontinuities, and it's just that the discontinuities are so small we don't notice them. Right.
Did everybody stop watching? Sorry,
I know it's too much. So I think we started with black holes a few minutes ago, and I totally understand the appeal of the idea of a black hole as a rift in a simulation, because it's just kind of a visually cool thing to think about. But actually, black holes are very orderly things. That is, they're very well described by general relativity, and I would expect a hole in the simulation to be something that doesn't fit well into physics. That is something that we simply cannot understand. And black holes are really, really understandable. So I think they're not a good candidate.
Hang on. Well, two things. One, it's obviously the holographic principle stems from black hole theory, right? Because you're dealing with how much entropy is in the system for the event horizon. So there's a relationship there. But we understand the outside. We understand the event horizon and all that kind of stuff, the photosphere of the black hole. But when you get into the singularity, then there's problems. So would that be maybe where the discontinuities would come in?
That's a fair point. I'd be totally willing to accept that kind of argument. And one of the things that astrophysicists argue about is whether you can have a naked singularity, that is one not surrounded by some orderly object, right? And that might be a good way to think about the simulation bug, right? There's a part of the code that's not working well, but the simulation can't access it directly. So all you can do is access, the routine that's supposed to access that.
Yeah, I don't think there could be a naked singularity. I think the universe hates naked. The universe, for some reason, this could be the rules. You can't have a naked singularity, and you can't have a true vacuum.
Could be. You might want to stick time travel in there too. If you want to do that, yeah.
Monistic time. I mean, there's a lot of things you can probably come up with rules for to the base level of reality.
This is
that's right. So
this is like mind bending.
It's totally mind bending, right? Because essentially what we're doing is we're questioning the basic categories that we use to understand everything else. And that gets tricky, right? So if you're a Minecraft character, you've never seen a circle, right? It's all squares everywhere. Can you even conceive of a circle? Right? Is that something that you could even imagine?
Sure.
That's a fascinating question.
I can. Why couldn't you conceive of that's a concept? You can conceive of a circle. Mm-hmm. Can you have a perfect one? No.
Mm-hmm.
Oh
well, if you don't know anything,
wait, he's lost his voice.
Have we lost Phillip again?
Yeah, we lost Phil again. Phil's having glitches. This is what happens when the program has a glitch and a bug. You end up with Phil.
Phillip, what did you do last time to fix it? Try that again. Okay.
Hi, Phil.
But I think what he's saying is, if you're, in Minecraft, it's all made of the squares. So if that's all of your surroundings and you don't have any concept of a circle, why would you need to come up with it? It affects you none. So maybe there's something out there that we can't conceive because we have no notion of it.
Yeah, that's right. And I think this is one of the things that's fun about thinking through the simulation theory, is that it makes us aware of things like that. In the same way the Minecraft character can't think about a circle, is there something out there that we simply can't conceive of because we don't have the fundamental right. Things that allow it to exist aren't written into our reality.
Right. Phillip, are you back with us?
Are you back, Phillip? Nope.
No.
Oh.
He is going for the sign language.
I definitely think there's certain things we can't conceive.
Steve, Dave, can you let's send Phillip a new link. So maybe send me a new link for him, and I'll send it to you over Twitter. We'll see if that takes care of that.
Upgrade your Windows, Phillip. And I'm talking about
on a Mac.
Okay, well, there you go, better. Yeah, I can't believe I just said that. Yeah, I hate the Windows updates. It just drives me nuts because it forces you to do it, right? Linux is so much better. Oh my God. But I think there's certain things that you can't imagine. Like what would it be like to even imagine something like a square circle? It's not something you can actually imagine.
Nonsensical.
Mm-hmm.
Right, because it is nonsensical, right? So you can't. There's certain things you just can't imagine, no matter how hard you try, because it's like, what would that actually entail?
Mine for me would be the end of the universe. Like, I don't think you can imagine where the universe ends. You know what I'm saying? Like that's also mind bending, I think, because we know that it goes on far. Is it like a wall that it hits, or some kind of barrier?
Yeah, and that's right. So I think there's a certain sense in which our brains, whether they were designed by evolution or God or the simulation constructors, have certain things they do well and things they don't do well. And surely there are things that they just can't do at all, right?
Right. What are your personally? How do you feel about this theory? Do you subscribe to the fact theory? Do you think it's possible?
It's certainly possible. I think it's the recursiveness of the simulation, sort of just what we were just talking about, that because we can only use the tools of the simulation to talk about it, it seems very unlikely to me that we would ever be able to find a hole in it if it exists.
Right.
And, some people do like probabilistic arguments. They're at, any civilization that could make a simulation would do so. And then that simulated civilization would make their own simulations too. So if you picked a random civilization, it would likely be a simulated one. I can't say I find that a particularly persuasive line of reasoning. But at the same time, it doesn't have an obvious flaw. It's just not particularly persuasive to me.
Right. What about one question that I have is, do you think that humanity as a whole, if they were to find out that we were in a simulation, do you think that would affect anyone's behavior overall? Like, would people become nihilistic? Would we see an Armageddon?
It's an interesting thought. My sense is that if we can manipulate the simulation in some way, can we hack it? Right? Can we find bugs that we can use? If any of those things are true, then that would make a pretty profound difference in the way we lived our lives. But I don't know how I would live my life differently, knowing that the second law of thermodynamics was programmed rather than just came to be. I don't know what I would do different.
Steve, you want to? I'm going to try to feel through this real quick.
Sure.
I'll let you kind of go ahead.
Yeah. Look,